you doing?
I am doing great. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much. We are all so excited to have you back. Obviously, you're one of our favorites to have as a guest speaker, and especially on the topic of self-love. All month long, especially in the mastermind, we've been talking about self-love, self-compassion, how it relates to our healing journey. So really excited to have you in to talk about that today. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I guess we could discuss this, and I'll give you my perspective, and we can open up for questions. So for those of you that don't know who I am, maybe that are joining us for the first time and hearing me talk, but I'm a functional medicine practitioner. So my day job, my heart, my passion is really giving people a vehicle to find out why they feel the way that they do and let them know that they are heard and they are valued, and we have to do something different sometimes to see something different. So that's been a passion of mine for a long time. I started one of the first functional medicine telehealth centers in the world over a decade ago. And my dad is Dr. Cole, the older one, the one with less hair. But I'm glad that I get the opportunity to speak with you all today. So, I mean, when they asked me to speak about self-compassion and self-love, I was honored about it because actually I think that is actually, if I had to give my opinion on this, I actually think it's the seed of sustainable wellness. I think it's the genesis of sustainable wellness. Because look, the food protocol, the natural medicine protocol, the fasting protocol, all these amazing things, they are important. They're the physical vehicle to modulate our biochemistry in a positive way. Without a doubt, that we know that. The labs don't lie, the improvement of symptoms don't lie, that the improvement of quality of life doesn't lie. That's true. But for some people, and I would say for many, if not most people, the why is just as important as the what. And for some people, it's actually more important than the what. Because if you have two people with the same symptoms, more or less, same set of labs, same set of issues, one person hates what they're doing, and they're filled with negativity, even if it may be valid. They're reliving trauma or reliving stress, or they really don't like the food protocol, and they really are filled with a lot of that shame and dread and negative obsession about health and food in their body. That's going to produce a completely different outcome than someone that loves what they're doing, that is using self-care as a form of self-respect, that is not looking at all the things they can't have, but focusing on showing up for themselves to say, how can I do things that make me feel great? And I want to do more of the things that make me feel great. And I want to do less of the things that don't make me feel great. Not because I can't have it. I can have whatever I want, but I choose to feel better over things that sabotage my health. I love feeling great more than I miss that thing that didn't make me feel great. So it's that freedom and that what I call food peace and body peace that I want all my patients, I want all of you to find for yourselves if you haven't found that for you. And I see that clicks sometimes for people. Sometimes it clicks really early on. Sometimes it clicks before they meet us. Sometimes it clicks months down the road. But there's a shift that happens for the sustainably healthy that invariably has to happen every time, where it goes from all these do's and don'ts to, oh, I can't have this punitive, arduous, dogmatic, shame-based thing, to owning it for yourselves and love feeling great more than you missed something that didn't make you feel great. That's just logical. And that doesn't happen overnight. When you're in the throes of a flare, it does not happen overnight. That journey is rough sometimes. So I don't want to make light of that journey. So be okay, accept where you're at right now, but be mindful of where you want to go. And I think that is that catalyst that I want everybody to find for themselves, because then it's a no-brainer. It's like, okay, these things are making me feel great. This isn't something that I say a lot and I've said for the past decade, but maybe it should be the subtitle, or maybe it is already. The subtitle of today's talk is, you can't heal a body you hate. You cannot shame your way into wellness. You cannot obsess your way into health. And I want people to have that agency over their health. And it's that paradigm shift that's everything. Then it goes from this obsessive thing that's like so miserable to, no, I want to come from a place of abundance to say, let's do things that make me feel great. Doesn't mean it's a quick fix. It doesn't mean you get it overnight, but it's like a practice. It is I almost see a lot of these things as like a proverbial yoga class. In my newest book, in Intuitive Fasting, I have deep dive conversations throughout the book because this is the ethos of our work. This is the ethos of what we're talking about. And all of these amazing tools like fasting and food and supplements, all this stuff, it is secondary really to someone healing their head and their heart and their relationship with their body and healing their relationship with food, because that is the fertile foundation for that amazing fast, or that fertile foundation for the amazing food protocol, that fertile foundation for that amazing supplement protocol. So that's a paradigm shift. So in Intuitive Fasting, I compared a lot of these things that you all are doing as a proverbial yoga class. So if I show up to, and this was me at some point, and I still would say I'm not great at yoga, but when I first showed up for yoga, I was horrible at it. And what if I went and did an advanced yoga class and I just started, I felt miserable. I've actually been in a few of those. I'm like, what the heck? This is totally unnatural. This is punitive. This is horrible. The human body should not move like this. This is what the heck? There's something wrong with me and there's something wrong with this. This is not normal. Well, I probably did too much too soon, and I didn't meet my body where it was at, where I could progress and lean into it, but lean into it sustainably. And I find that sometimes people go with the best of intentions, but they go and they do an advanced thing and they think more is better. That's not always the best thing, because then what happens is you end up thinking, this doesn't work for me. I feel horrible. My gosh, this doesn't work. Well, it's like, no, context matters with these things. And maybe you just didn't do it the right way for where you were at on your journey. And what you do now and works for you now isn't necessarily what's going to work for you down the road as your health improves. So think of intermittent fasting and food as medicine as sort of this proverbial yoga class where you start off with, and the way that they design the protocols that you all are doing starts out with meeting your body where it's at, and we can adjust it accordingly because we're all different, but then lean into it incrementally. But everyone, just like with yoga, everyone moves at their own pace because everybody's coming at a different baseline. And we're stretching and contracting your metabolism, really what's happening. As you get more metabolically flexible, just like someone gets flexible with yoga physically, that's what's happening on a metabolic standpoint and an immunological standpoint, where your actual immune system's getting more flexible and more resilient. We're gaining resilience. So all of that shifting that's happening in the microbiome and the metabolism, the mitochondria, all of these things, you're becoming more flexible. And just like with yoga, there's going to be times where this is new and this is uncomfortable, but that's like any workout. When you've never done it before, it can be a little bit weird at first. But the more you show up to that practice and more you show up for yourself, the more it's going to become very easy. And at the end of that yoga class, there's that savasana where you lay back and relax and like, wow, I just did that. And that's what I think that a lot of these cyclical, and what I explore in intuitive fasting is the cyclical nature. You don't always have to do the same thing. I think that diet variation, food window variation is a great tool to experiment, but we're all different. There's no one size fits all with these things. So some people need the deeper fasts, and some people don't need those deeper fasts, and that's okay. And again, what you're doing now or what works for you now may not be what you need down the road. So be okay. Just because it worked for somebody else doesn't mean you have to do the exact same thing, or you're a failure, or this isn't working for you. And you have an amazing support system within this team here where you can adjust it in real time. There's a responsiveness and a adjustment that you can meet your body where it's at. But all of it is predicated on using self-care as a form of self-respect, of saying, this is not about all the things I can't have. Because look, avoiding things that make you feel lousy isn't restrictive. Not having things that cause flare-ups is not restrictive. What actually is restrictive is feeling lousy, actually. So we need to shift our paradigm and don't let the culture and the world tell us that eating real foods and doing things that humans would have done for thousands and thousands of years is somehow strange or punitive or extreme. What is extreme and radical is living with a chronic health problem and not having agency over your health. That's extreme. So you really need to take all the amazing tools that you're doing and saying, look, I love myself enough to do things that I want to feel good. And if your family doesn't understand, your friends don't understand, meet them where they're at. They don't have to understand. To just say it in a way that you think that they'll understand. Say it in love, say it in understanding, say it in grace. Don't shame them. Don't preach to them, but you can plant a seed. And I've seen so many times where people, they didn't have ears to hear when you said it, and they maybe were critical or judgmental, or they didn't understand it, but stay true. And that's why I think community is so important with where you guys are at right now, because you guys have a lot of like-minded people and some not like-minded people too. And that's good. That refines you, and you can learn and go outside of your comfort zones as well to really be on this journey together, even if the journey doesn't look exactly the same as yours. But then later on, I see that the seeds that were planted come to fruition, and people are like, okay. And sometimes it's the messenger, not the message. You know, it's like if I say, like to my kid, like my two sweet children, my 14-year-old son, 11-year-old daughter, if I say something to them, it's like, well, dad said it, right? It's like it's not as receivable sometimes, but their friend could say it, or their uncle could say it, their aunt could say it, and it's like, oh yeah, well, Uncle Steven said it, so we're gonna do it. That is the same with friends and family sometimes. Is that you can plant a seed, but that seed will come to life with a different messenger. But remember, like from your heart, like if you're operating from a place of self-respect and self-love and compassion towards yourself, and say, this is a journey that's going to take time. I hope that you all would give that same compassion and understanding to people that just don't get it. That's all right. They don't have to. And not everybody is going to get it. Because if you look at statistics and what's going out in the world today, there's a lot of misinformation that's out there. And there's a lot of people that mean well, but that are misinformed. And there's a lot of people that mean well, but they're just not in the place in their life where they can receive this information. And that's okay. But I think it's interesting to see when health is restored and people reclaim their life, there's really no room for pontification. There's no room for like, this is my opinion and this isn't good. And it's not going to matter, because who can argue with improved health? Who can argue with improved the light in your eyes coming into play, or your labs improving, or your increased energy? I mean, your life is going to speak for itself. You actually don't need to even say much words at all. Actually, it'll just be living out the things that you're accomplishing for yourself. That's kind of my thoughts on this, guys. It doesn't mean you get it overnight. That's why every day, just like with that yoga practice, you can't do what you're doing physically once and saying, well, it doesn't work for me because you did it once and it's like you're at where you need to be. Same with compassion for yourself and other people. That's also a yoga, because it doesn't come naturally to us sometimes, especially when we feel justified. But we need to keep showing up with that mental, emotional, spiritual yoga as well. And that's why a gratitude practice, journaling, mindfulness meditation, acts of stillness, whether it could be physically yoga or Tai Chi, or just sitting in silence off of technology, or forest bathing. You talk about Shinrin Yoku and what the Japanese and the South Koreans are researching of how to use nature as a meditation. We need to not just to do the physical stuff. The physical stuff's important, but this bi-directional relationship between our thoughts and emotions and our physiology are real. Meaning our thoughts and emotions, if we're feeding ourselves information on social media or negative internal chatter, if we're constantly feeding that stress and anxiety and obsession and shame that's ingrained from a very young age for most of us, that's going to raise inflammation levels up. That's going to raise cortisol levels up, which is an immunosuppressant, try to bring inflammation levels down. It's going to impact your healing crisis. Doesn't mean that you stress about not stressing. That's not about what I'm trying to do here. I'm saying we need to start to activate, just like we're doing physical things for health, we need to do mental, emotional, spiritual things in our health, because they're really one and the same. Mental health is not separate from physical health. Mental health is physical health. Our brain is part of our body, and these things that are non-measurable, like stress and anxiety and shame and negativity, that stuff that you can't measure directly will be measurably impacted in the form of chronic inflammation and slowed healing time and all this stuff. So I've seen countless of times people that eat the right things, they do all the amazing things, but if you're serving your body a big slice of stress every day or a big slice of shame every day, that's junk food for the soul. You can't get to health with that. You will get somewhere, but you'll be stuck at a plateau invariably. You have to deal with your head and your heart. It is harder than changing the foods that you eat, because you can just not eat it and focus on all the things you can have. It's a little bit more insidious and a little bit more abstract to say, I'm not going to serve myself a big slice of stress or shame every day. But the practice of showing up for yourself in these acts of gratitude, mindfulness meditation, nature, getting out in nature and using that as a meditation, just unplugging and just being in silence and stillness and breathing exercises. These are all things you can do to start to realize you are not your thoughts and emotions. And many, especially Western thinking, we completely identify with our thoughts and emotions and opinions. Like we are our opinions. We get super heated if someone disagrees with us. We get super, we think we are our anxious thoughts. We think we are shameful emotions, but we're not at all. You're the observing presence of them. And these acts of stillness will create a space between your thoughts and emotions and in you, who you truly were created to be. So these things are in constant autopilot all the time. They're racing and you just so identify with them that they will bring about manifesting things in your life that will be repeated things from the past. But by doing these things that I know you guys are all encouraged to do, these acts of stillness, whatever that looks like for you, be consistent. Just like going to the gym, be consistent. Just like eating the food you get to eat, show up every day for that too. That is actually in intuitive fasting, I call them metaphysical meals. So whether you're eating or you're fasting, doesn't really matter. Have a metaphysical meal at least once a day. Probably should be having it 2 or 3 times a day, because that is what you're serving your head and your heart, you're serving your body. So that's really, really important. And for people that say, well, meditation's not for me, those are typically the people that need to do it the most, because it's your racing thoughts that are actually, it's scary to have to go inward. And sometimes the magic lies in the places we're ignoring the most. And sometimes we need to calm that noise, or just at least observe it. And as that noise that we have in our mind, to start to break it up. Because it's normally those incessant thoughts that are saying meditation isn't for me, because you're quieting and not distracting yourself anymore. And not distracting ourselves can be scary, because we have to start dealing with things that we're putting off or we're ignoring or we're just distracting ourselves from. And I get it. It's not easy sometimes. And sometimes you need an expert in the field to walk you through that. So sometimes it's definitely doesn't make sense to do it alone. And sometimes it's as simple as a community like this. Sometimes it's a therapist. Sometimes it's a trauma specialist. Sometimes it is something like this to say, you know what, my thoughts are scary. These racing thoughts are scary. That trauma body that's living out my everyday is scary. And meditation can actually bring that to your awareness to say, yeah, I do need to deal with these things. And you can work through those thoughts and emotions with a specialist. But for many people, they don't necessarily need a specialist, but they do need to lean into these practices to start to untangle them from who you truly are. So that's my thoughts. I hope it made sense, but thank you guys for giving me the opportunity.